The Tazkrai Empire was a leviathan that devoured galaxies. For eons, their warships, each the size of small moons, had plundered and absorbed countless worlds, spreading their reign of terror across the stars. They had perfected the art of conquest, swift, brutal, and absolute. Their technology, far superior to any civilization they encountered, was an unassailable force. No species had ever stood in their way for long. No world had ever defied their will. For the Tazkrai, the universe was a chessboard, and they were the kings, moving with ruthless precision. The Tazkrai were a species forged in the fires of war. Their empire, built on the backs of enslaved worlds, was a testament to their power. They had a singular focus: expansion. No corner of the galaxy was safe from their relentless drive to consume, and they met each new world with overwhelming force. Colonization was their creed, subjugation their mantra. For the Tazkrai, the concept of struggle was foreign. After all, what could stand against their might? In their war room aboard the dreadnought Tyrannus, Emperor Naxar, the Conqueror, surveyed the latest reports of a newly discovered planet, Earth. At first, his officers thought it would be a simple conquest. It had the markers of countless other worlds they had subdued: a technologically primitive society, scattered nations, and disorganized defenses. The human race, on the surface, seemed to be no different than any other species the Tazkrai had obliterated. But the reports were strange. The humans were unlike anything the Tazkrai had encountered. Their technology, while not as advanced as the Tazkrai's, was rapidly progressing. Their military was unremarkable, but their ingenuity, their adaptability, was unnerving. The Tazkrai's initial analysis suggested the humans were a chaotic, fractured species with no centralized government or command structure. It would be easy to crush them, they assumed. The Tazkrai had done it 1,000 times before. However, Emperor Naxar's instincts told him that something was different this time. A planet that defied all the rules of conquest was no simple target. The humans had, somehow, managed to survive despite being a primitive species by galactic standards. He narrowed his yellow eyes as he listened to his advisors. Their reports spoke of Earth's rapid technological advancements and the sudden emergence of something the Tazkrai had never seen before: an unyielding will to fight. "Underestimate them at your peril," Naxar muttered. He was a conqueror, but even he knew that arrogance could be the downfall of any great empire. The Tazkrai had ruled the stars for centuries, but the universe was vast, and the balance of power could shift with a single misstep. Still, the Tazkrai were confident in their overwhelming might. Their warships outclassed anything the humans could muster. Their fleets of dreadnoughts, each carrying enough firepower to obliterate entire cities, would make quick work of any resistance the humans might attempt. With their control of gravity-altering weapons, plasma cannons, and shockwave pulses, no force could stand against them for long. But Earth's resistance wasn't just about weapons. It was about something far harder to quantify: the human spirit. It was something the Tazkrai could not measure on their scanners, could not account for in their strategies. In their centuries of conquest, they had never encountered a species that fought not just with technology, but with an indomitable will to survive, a defiance that no empire, no matter how mighty, could extinguish. Emperor Naxar clenched his fist, his mind turning over the possibilities. The Tazkrai would bring their full force to bear on this new world. The humans would fall, as every other species had. It was a certainty, a law of nature. The only question was how long it would take. The universe had always bent to the will of the Tazkrai. Why should this be any different? Little did he know, this seemingly insignificant world was about to teach the Tazkrai the meaning of true resistance. In the vast expanse of space, few had ever taken notice of Earth. The planet, a small blue dot in the grand scheme of the galaxy, had long been regarded as a quiet, insignificant corner of the universe. However, that was changing. Humanity, the once primitive species confined to a single world, was on the cusp of a technological revolution that would not only reshape their own future, but would soon capture the attention of the galaxy at large. Earth had spent the past few centuries in a furious race toward the stars. After centuries of conflict and environmental destruction, humanity had united in a common purpose: peaceful exploration and technological advancement. What began as modest efforts to reach beyond their atmosphere evolved into the creation of vast space stations, self-sustaining colonies on nearby moons, and a fleet of interstellar ships capable of exploring distant stars. The human race, against all odds, had found its place among the stars. The centerpiece of humanity's new era of exploration was the U.S. Vanguard, a marvel of human engineering. Unlike anything that had been seen before, the Vanguard was humanity's answer to the galactic threats lurking just beyond their reach. It was a warship that defied conventional understanding, a vessel designed not just for exploration, but for survival, for defense, and for victory. Built using a combination of reverse-engineered alien technologies and their own innovations, the ship was equipped with energy shields that could withstand incredible amounts of firepower, weapons that could disable entire fleets, and a new type of propulsion system that made the Vanguard faster and more maneuverable than any ship in the galaxy. The U.S. Vanguard was humanity's greatest achievement, and their first line of defense against a galaxy that had long since moved beyond them. But no one, not even the humans themselves, could have anticipated how their creation would become a symbol of something far greater. As tensions rose across the galaxy, word of the Tazkrai Empire's expansion reached Earth. While many other species quivered at the thought of an impending Tazkrai invasion, humanity stood resolute. The leaders of Earth had no illusions. They were a small species with a fledgling fleet, and the Tazkrai were a force to be reckoned with. But humanity's strength had never been in its numbers or in its technology alone. It was in its will, its resilience, and its refusal to accept defeat. Humanity's warships, though new to the galactic stage, had proven themselves in smaller skirmishes against pirate factions and hostile alien races. They were battle-tested, but now they would face their greatest trial. The U.S. Vanguard, under the command of Captain Sarah Solis, would be humanity's first true test in the fires of war with an empire that had never known resistance. Commander Solis, a former fleet officer who had risen through the ranks due to her unshakable determination and strategic genius, was no stranger to the weight of responsibility. She had stood at the forefront of humanity's spacefaring age, and now she stood at the helm of the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. Her crew was handpicked for their experience, their loyalty, and their belief in humanity's right to exist as an independent force in the galaxy. "Prepare for entry into Tazkrai space," Captain Solis announced as the U.S. Vanguard crossed the threshold into unknown space. "This is not just about survival. This is about proving who we are. We stand for Earth, and we stand for every species that has ever been silenced by the Tazkrai." The crew cheered. They understood the gravity of their mission. The odds were overwhelming, but for the first time, the galaxy would witness the tenacity of humanity. A species once thought inconsequential was now staring down the most fearsome empire in the known universe. But the U.S. Vanguard was not just a ship. It was a statement. It was proof that even in a galaxy ruled by empires of unimaginable power, humanity had a place. And that place, no matter how small it seemed in the vastness of space, was not up for debate. The Tazkrai had always prided themselves on their overwhelming power, but nothing had prepared them for the U.S. Vanguard. When the ship emerged into Tazkrai-controlled space, it was immediately flagged by the Empire's advanced detection systems designed to track and analyze the movements of anything within their vast territories. But when the Tazkrai's fleet commander, Admiral Vaxar, ordered a targeting lock on the Vanguard, something strange happened. For reasons that baffled even the most experienced Tazkrai analysts, the human ship seemed to disappear from their scanners. Not in the conventional sense, but as though the Vanguard had bent space itself, evading detection like a ghost. The Tazkri Empire, for all its technological superiority, was accustomed to threats in a particular form: massive, overwhelming, and predictable. But this human vessel was anything but predictable. "Scan again. Confirm location," Vaxar ordered, his many eyes narrowing in disbelief. His ship, a colossal dreadnought bristling with weapons, had never encountered a foe that could so effortlessly evade its sensors. The U.S. Vanguard, though outgunned and outnumbered, held an advantage that the Tazkri didn't anticipate: its exceptional maneuverability and stealth technology. Designed to be agile and difficult to track, the Vanguard weaved between the massive dreadnoughts of the Tazkri fleet, its sleek frame barely visible against the backdrop of the stars. Captain Solis, commanding her ship with unyielding focus, led her crew in executing a series of calculated, precise maneuvers that confounded their larger adversaries. "We've locked onto their lidship, Captain," reported Lieutenant Reed, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Weapons are primed. Shall we engage?" Captain Solis glanced at the display, her eyes flickering over the vast expanse of enemy ships arrayed before them. The Tazkri fleet, a terrifying formation of hundreds of ships, was closing in. Their plasma cannons were already charging, ready to unleash destruction. The odds were impossible, yet Captain Solis had no intention of fleeing. "Not yet," she said. "We'll strike when they least expect it." The Vanguard wasn't equipped to engage in a traditional battle against such a formidable foe. The human strategy was clear. They would hit fast, hit hard, and then disappear before the Tazkri could retaliate. The U.S. Vanguard was an instrument of asymmetrical warfare, designed to inflict maximum damage while avoiding direct confrontation with the overwhelming might of the enemy. The Tazkri, however, were not known for their patience. As the human ship danced through their ranks, the Tazkri fleet began firing in every direction, launching volleys of energy blasts that tore apart anything they touched. But despite the chaos, the Vanguard remained a moving target, its shields absorbing the incoming fire without ever slowing its advance. "We're being hunted," Solis muttered, watching the Tazkri fleet trying to encircle them. "But we'll make them regret it." The human warship struck first, its weapons delivering a series of deadly accurate shots at the nearest Tazkri vessel. The ship's hull crackled as the powerful plasma cannons tore through its shields and cut into the heart of its engines. The Vanguard quickly retreated, vanishing into the darkness of space before the Tazkri could react. The Tazkri fleet, now stunned and momentarily disoriented, struggled to recalibrate their tactics. It was an embarrassing moment for an empire that had never faced resistance like this. "What is happening?" Vaxar demanded, his voice rising in frustration. "We are the conquerors of worlds. Why can't we catch this human ship?" His officers scrambled to provide answers, but there were no easy explanations. The Vanguard was unlike any enemy they had ever faced. It wasn't just the ship's advanced stealth technology or its impressive firepower. It was how the humans used their knowledge of Tazkri tactics to predict their moves and stay one step ahead. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard, Commander Solis allowed herself a brief, hard smile as she watched the chaotic reactions of the Tazkri. Their fleet was in disarray, their pride wounded by the unexpected hit. She knew the Tazkri would retaliate soon, and that would be the moment she was waiting for. "Status report, Lieutenant," she asked. "Shields holding steady," Reed replied. "We've caused damage to one of their mid-tier dreadnoughts, but they're reorganizing. They won't give us much time before they try to destroy us completely." "Good," Solis said, her tone resolute. "They've underestimated us. Let's make sure they never forget that." The U.S. Vanguard disappeared into the void once more, its crew bracing for what would surely be the start of a long, brutal fight. The first encounter between humanity and the Tazkri had begun, not with overwhelming force, but with human ingenuity and defiance, a signal that the galaxy would never be the same again. The Tazkri Empire had always been a machine, vast, efficient, and merciless. The concept of failure was foreign to them. Yet, after their first encounter with the U.S. Vanguard, that familiar confidence began to waver. The humans, with their limited resources, had managed to inflict real damage to the Tazkri fleet. For the first time in centuries, the Tazkri warlords were faced with the unsettling realization that they could be outmaneuvered, outwitted, and perhaps even defeated. Admiral Vaxar seethed with frustration. His once perfect fleet had been thrown into disarray by a single human ship. Despite their technological superiority, the Tazkri could not track the Vanguard with the efficiency they had expected. The human ship had turned their own strategies against them, using speed and precision to strike at the heart of their might. No Tazkri fleet had ever faced an opponent so elusive and resourceful. "Send more ships after them," Vaxar ordered through clenched mandibles, his voice dripping with anger. "We will not allow this to continue. They will learn what it means to defy the Tazkri." The Tazkri warlords, all ruthless and hungry for control, were unanimous in their determination. The Empire would crush humanity, but not with brute force alone. The humans had shown they were too unpredictable for conventional warfare. It was time to turn the tide with something more insidious, a trap. The Tazkri began to tighten their grip on the sector, bringing in reinforcements and deploying long-range weapons designed to draw the Vanguard into a deadly web. The idea was simple: force the human ship into a corner where they could not escape. Then, the Tazkri would unleash their full might, overwhelming the human vessel before it could retreat. Back aboard the Vanguard, Captain Solis watched with keen eyes as the Tazkri fleet began to shift positions, seemingly anticipating their every move. It was clear to her that the enemy was adapting to their tactics, becoming more coordinated and ruthless with each passing encounter. The Tazkri were now hunting the Vanguard, laying out a series of traps and ambush points, waiting for them to make a mistake. But mistakes were something Captain Solis refused to make. "They're starting to get smarter," Solis muttered to her crew, her voice low but steady. "We need to stay one step ahead." Lieutenant Reed, standing at her side, nodded. "We've lost contact with 2 of the smaller ships we sent out for recon. It looks like they've been ensnared in a gravity field. They're trying to corner us, Captain." Solis narrowed her eyes, her mind racing. "They think they can force us into a corner. They've underestimated the Vanguard." She turned to her tactical officer. "Prepare the phase jump. We're going to hit them from an angle they don't expect." The Vanguard had one advantage that the Tazkri didn't fully understand: its ability to phase jump. The technology, a human innovation derived from ancient alien relics, allowed the ship to instantaneously shift between 2 points in space, effectively allowing it to teleport short distances. While it wasn't perfect, it gave the Vanguard an incredible strategic edge, one that the Tazkri had yet to account for. Solis made the call. "Initiate phase jump on my mark. Now." In a flash, the Vanguard disappeared from its previous position and reappeared on the opposite side of the Tazkri fleet. The aliens, already expecting the human ship to retreat, were caught completely off guard. The Vanguard's sudden reappearance allowed it to fire a concentrated blast at the nearest Tazkri dreadnought, cracking its hull wide open with an unexpected salvo of high-energy pulses. The Tazkri fleet, still reeling from the sudden appearance of the Vanguard, scrambled to adjust. Their communications were in disarray, their formations breaking as the humans struck with lightning speed. The Vanguard danced through the gaps in their fleet, its weapons delivering targeted strikes on key ships, disabling engines, severing power cores, and causing critical system failures. The Tazkri couldn't keep up with the human ship's unpredictability, their vaunted technological superiority slowly becoming their greatest weakness. "We're causing damage," Lieutenant Reed shouted over the comms, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "The Tazkri fleet is beginning to fall apart." Captain Solis remained calm, her gaze focused on the flashing red lights of the tactical display. They had caught the Tazkri off guard, but it wouldn't last forever. The enemy was still vast, their numbers overwhelming. She knew the Tazkri would soon adjust to the human tactics, But this victory, this small but significant triumph, was theirs. The galaxy was beginning to take notice. Outside, the vast Tazkree dreadnoughts burned as the Vanguard continued its hit-and-run tactics, a symbol of human ingenuity and willpower. The Tazkree were beginning to unravel. Their unshakable confidence in their empire was slowly crumbling as the realization dawned. The humans were not like the others. They wouldn't fall without a fight. "Stay focused," Solace said, her voice steady. "This is just the beginning." The Tazkree had been humbled. The Vanguard had delivered blows to their fleet that were felt across the Empire. The once unshakable arrogance of the Tazkree warlords began to crack, replaced by an unrelenting drive for revenge. The humans, who had once been beneath their notice, were now a legitimate threat, one that could not be ignored. In the grand war room of the Tazkree flagship Tyrannus, Emperor Naxar seethed with fury. His many mandibles quivered in frustration as he watched the reports of the Vanguard's continued attacks on his fleet. The human warship had caused significant damage to several of his most prized dreadnoughts, and now it was clear that the humans would not back down. They had become a symbol of defiance, a blight on the Empire's glorious record of conquest. "We must crush them," Naxar hissed General Satar, a scared Tazkree veteran who had seen countless wars. "We underestimated them once, but no more. Let us show these humans that the Tazkree cannot be stopped." Naxar clenched his fists, his gaze narrowing. The loss of several warships had embarrassed him, but he was not a ruler who bowed to defeat. He was a conqueror, and no one, not even these stubborn humans, would stand in his way. "Deploy the dread Leviathans," Naxar ordered with a voice cold and resolute. "We will not waste time. We will end this struggle before it spreads further." The dread Leviathans were the Tazkree's ultimate weapons, massive, terrifying warships capable of decimating entire fleets with a single salvo. They were the Empire's final line of defense, a symbol of their absolute authority in the galaxy. For centuries, they had been kept in reserve for only the most dangerous of threats. And now, they were being called upon to wipe humanity from the stars. As the Leviathans prepared to launch, the Tazkree fleet began to assemble in a formation that would leave no room for escape. They were a sight to behold. Vast warships the size of moons, their engines humming with energy as they locked onto the Vanguard's last known location. The human ship would not survive this new onslaught. The Tazkree had learned their lesson. They would not allow their prey to escape again. Aboard the U.S. Vanguard, Captain Solis knew that their time was running out. Her ship had proven itself against the Tazkree, but even she understood the odds. The arrival of the dread Leviathans would shift the balance of power back into the hands of the Tazkree, and she didn't know how long her crew could continue the hit-and-run tactics that had served them so well. The Vanguard was fast, but it was not invincible. "We need to move," Solis said, her voice firm as she addressed her bridge crew. "The Leviathans are on their way. Once they arrive, we won't have the luxury of avoiding them." "We've sustained damage from their previous retaliation, Captain," Lieutenant Reed reported, his face grim. "The engines are holding, but we're running low on power. If we don't make a move soon, we might not be able to escape." Solis stood, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. The Tazkree were closing in, their massive warships appearing on the screen as dark, menacing shapes against the backdrop of stars. The humans had no illusion that they could win a conventional battle against the Leviathans, but they had something the Tazkree didn't: resourcefulness. "Reed, can we trigger a phase jump directly into their formation?" Solis asked, her mind already calculating the risks. Reed's brow furrowed. "It's risky, Captain. The phase jump technology doesn't allow for pinpoint accuracy. If we miscalculate by even a fraction of a second, we'll end up in the middle of a Tazkree firestorm." "We don't have another choice," Solis said, her voice unwavering. "Do it. Prepare the phase jump." The crew moved quickly, their hands flying over consoles as they made preparations for the most dangerous gamble they had ever taken. The Vanguard was the only hope for humanity, and it was about to enter the heart of the Tazkri's vengeful assault. Outside, the dark, looming presence of the dread Leviathans filled the void, their weapons charging for a final strike. Solis could almost feel the weight of their gaze, the certainty of their impending doom. Yet, even as fear gripped her heart, she knew that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to fight in the face of impossible odds. "Hold on," Solis said quietly, her voice calm but determined. "This is where we make our stand." The countdown began. The tension on the U.S. Vanguard was palpable as the countdown to the phase jump began. Captain Solis stood in front of the viewscreen, staring at the gathering storm of Tazkri warships. The dread Leviathans, colossal and terrifying, were only moments away from unleashing their full wrath. Yet there was no fear in Solis's eyes, only resolve. This was humanity's moment to prove that they could survive, that they could fight against the tide of the galaxy's overwhelming power. Phase jump in 5, 4, 3. Lieutenant Reed's voice was a calm, mechanical presence, yet even he couldn't suppress the anticipation that gripped him. 2, 1. A flash of blinding light filled the bridge as the Vanguard was hurled through space, its form warping and distorting as it ripped through the fabric of reality. The ship vanished from its current location, a heartbeat later reappearing within the heart of the Tazkri fleet, smack in the middle of their carefully laid trap. The Vanguard shuddered violently as it materialized, the surrounding void now filled with the overwhelming power of the dread Leviathans, their weapons charging for a strike that could obliterate the human ship in an instant. "Brace for impact," Solis shouted, but she was not a woman who waited for disaster to strike. She had already made her decision, her hands flying over the controls, pushing the ship to its limits. The Vanguard's engines flared as it shot forward, narrowly evading the first barrage of fire from the Leviathans. The sheer scale of the Tazkri ships was dizzying, their energy cannons massive and powerful, each shot a force capable of tearing the Vanguard apart. But the ship, agile and quick, danced between the deadly beams of energy, its advanced shields absorbing the hits that were impossible to avoid. "Shields are at 40%, Captain," cried the tactical officer, his voice tinged with panic. "We can't take much more. Keep firing. Target their engines. We need to cripple them." Solis barked, her eyes scanning the chaos around them. The Vanguard was a blur of motion, darting and weaving in a deadly dance through the Tazkri fleet, its weapons firing with deadly precision. The human ship launched a series of rapid-fire plasma bolts, each one striking the weak points of the Tazkri dreadnoughts. One of the smaller Leviathans erupted in a fiery explosion, its massive hull disintegrating into pieces. The Vanguard didn't slow. It was a living, breathing machine of war, powered by the will of its crew and the tenacity of the humans aboard. "They're losing their focus," Lieutenant Reed reported. "We're disrupting their command structure. The Leviathans are getting disorganized." Solis didn't let up. "Good. Keep them on the back foot. We'll hit them where it hurts." The Vanguard circled one of the larger Leviathans, getting dangerously close to its enormous guns. It was a deadly gambit, but it was the only option. With a sudden surge of energy, the ship veered into a high-speed roll, just as the Leviathan fired a colossal burst of energy directly at their position. The blast struck the Tazkri ship beside it instead, ripping apart its side and sending debris scattering in every direction. The Vanguard didn't wait for the debris to settle. It immediately launched a full salvo of high-yield plasma missiles at the exposed weak points of the dread Leviathan. The missiles tore into the massive warship's hull, destabilizing its core and igniting a chain reaction that would soon consume it. The Tazkri were beginning to panic. Their tactics, once so precise, were faltering in the face of the human ship's unpredictable nature. The Vanguard was not just a warship. It was a symbol of humanity's refusal to accept defeat. The human crew, every last one of them, had something to prove. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting to show the galaxy that humanity had a place among the stars, one that could not be taken away by brute force. Another Leviathan down. Reed shouted, his voice filled with triumph. The fleet's in disarray, Captain. They don't know how to handle this. Solis allowed herself a brief nod, but her focus never wavered. Keep it up. We have to finish this. There's no turning back now. The Vanguard continued its relentless assault, using its superior speed and agility to dodge incoming fire and strike at the heart of the Tazkri fleet. Another dreadnought fell, then another, as the humans pressed their advantage. The Tazkri were reeling, their once pristine lines of communication in disarray, their soldiers confused and terrified. They had never faced anything like this before, a force that refused to bend, that fought not just with technology, but with ingenuity and pure, unrelenting will. But even as the Tazkri fleet began to falter, Solis knew that this battle was far from over. The remaining Leviathans were already regrouping, their immense firepower preparing for a final desperate push. The Vanguard had earned its victories, but now it had to survive the ultimate challenge. The gamble had worked so far, but would it work until the end? Let me know if you need any changes or further expansions. The tide of the battle was turning, but not in the way Captain Solis had hoped. The Tazkri had begun to recover from their initial disarray. The remaining dread Leviathans, though damaged, were far from out of the fight. They were regrouping, their immense firepower now focused on the Vanguard. The human ship had struck first, but now it was on the defensive. Solis paced the bridge, her mind working rapidly. The Vanguard had dealt heavy damage, but the Leviathans were still formidable. If they could pull the humans into a direct confrontation, they would have the advantage. The odds of survival were rapidly shrinking with each passing second. Captain, shields are down to 25%, Lieutenant Reed reported, his voice tight with concern. We can't keep taking this kind of fire. Solis didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced. They needed to finish this, to break the Tazkri before their forces fully reorganized. The Vanguard was nimble, but its resilience was being tested with each exchange. The crew had given their all, but they were running on fumes, and she knew they couldn't outrun the Leviathans forever. Captain, incoming transmission, Lieutenant Marshal, the communications officer, announced. His voice was steady, though the tension in the air was undeniable. Solis stepped toward the console, listening intently. It was a direct communication from the Tazkri flagship Tyrannus. She could see the battle-scarred face of Admiral Vaxar on the screen, his many eyes narrowing as he stared into the camera. Human Captain, Vaxar hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. You have done well, but this game is over. You have damaged my fleet, yes, but you cannot win. We are the Tazkri. We will take this sector, and we will crush you beneath our boot. Surrender now, and your crew will be spared. Continue to resist, and you will die. There was a coldness in the Admiral's words, a certainty that echoed throughout the galaxy. The Tazkri were conquerors. They did not lose. It was that simple, but Solis, standing resolute before the screen, didn't flinch. We don't surrender, she replied, her voice calm but unwavering. We will fight until the last breath. You underestimate humanity. Vaxar's mandibles twitched in a grimace. Then prepare to die, human. The transmission cut off abruptly. Solis turned toward her crew, her eyes fierce. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about sending a message. Humanity wasn't going to bow to the will of an empire that thought it could rule the galaxy through sheer force. The Tazkri needed to know that they had made a terrible mistake. Prepare for the final phase jump, Solis ordered. We're going in. Lieutenant Reed hesitated for a moment, his face pale. Captain, we're pushing the limits of the phase jump technology. We can't keep jumping like this. The calculations. Do it, Solis interrupted. We don't have a choice. The Vanguard had a final trick up its sleeve, a plan to destabilize the core of the largest remaining Leviathan in the Tazkri fleet. If they could phase jump directly into the heart of that ship's command center, They might just trigger a chain reaction that could cripple the entire Tazkri fleet. But the risk was enormous. If the jump wasn't precise, the Vanguard would be caught in the explosion, or worse. The crew scrambled, fingers flying over consoles, calculating the precise moment for the phase jump. The countdown began. Every second was crucial. Solis felt the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. This was it, the tipping point. Either the humans would fall, or they would make their mark on the galaxy. Phase jump in 10, 9. Lieutenant Reed's voice was strained, his gaze locked onto the controls. Solis' hands tightened around the rail in front of her, her eyes never leaving the view screen, where the remaining Leviathans loomed ominously, preparing for their final strike. She couldn't let the Vanguard fall into their trap. Not now. 5, 4, 3. Her heart pounded as the Vanguard braced itself for the most dangerous jump it had ever made. 2, 1. With a deafening whine, the Vanguard vanished, its form snapping out of reality as the phase jump took effect. It reappeared almost instantaneously, inside the heart of the massive Leviathan. Time seemed to slow. The Vanguard shot forward, its engine screaming as it tore into the heart of the Leviathan's command center, the human ship's powerful weapons unleashing their fury at the core of the Tazkri vessel. Explosions rippled through the hull, shattering the Leviathan's armor and setting off a catastrophic chain reaction. The Vanguard's crew held their breath as the ship lurched and spun, the destructive force of the explosions shaking it to its core. The battle wasn't over, but they had made their move, and they had sent a message to the Tazkri. Humanity would never be crushed. The shockwave from the explosion reverberated through the very fabric of space, rattling the Vanguard and sending shudders throughout the ship. The Leviathan that the Vanguard had plunged into was dying, its massive frame crumbling under the destructive power of the human warship's barrage. Flames and debris billowed out into the void, the remains of the once dominant Tazkri warship scattering across the stars. Solis gritted her teeth as the Vanguard reeled from the impact. The ship's internal alarms blared, warning of damage to the hull and vital systems. The phase jump had worked, but it had come at a cost. The ship was critically wounded. The engines were barely functional, and the shields were down to less than 10%. "Report," Solis barked, turning to her crew. "Shields are gone, Captain," Lieutenant Reed replied, his voice strained. "We've lost power to the forward engines. We're drifting. We can't escape without full repair." "Damage report from the outer hull," Solis pressed, her voice calm but firm. "We've sustained significant structural damage to the aft sections," the tactical officer, Ensign Greer, reported. "It's a miracle we're still in one piece. The ship's integrity is holding, but just barely." Despite the chaos around her, Solis remained focused. The Vanguard had done what it set out to do, cripple one of the Tazkri Leviathans, shattering the command structure of their fleet. But now it was vulnerable. The Tazkri would not let this act of defiance go unanswered. The remaining Leviathans were regrouping, and their firepower was unmatched. This was the final stand. "Reed," Solis said, her tone unwavering, "can we make one last phase jump? We need to buy time for the fleet to retreat." Reed hesitated for a moment, his fingers hovering over the controls. "The phase jump system's damaged, Captain. It would take too long to reboot and recalibrate. We don't have that kind of time." Solis glanced at the view screen. The remaining Tazkri ships were converging, their deadly weapons charging for the final assault. The Leviathans had regrouped, their enormous cannons glowing with lethal energy. This was it. There would be no more chances, no more miracles. But there was one last card to play. Solis turned to her crew with a grim but resolute expression. "We may not be able to phase jump, but we can still take the fight to them. Fire at will," she ordered. A deafening roar filled the bridge as the Vanguard's remaining weapons powered up. The ship may have been battered, but it still had enough power to make the Tazkri pay. With a series of rapid-fire energy blasts, the Vanguard launched everything it had left, targeting the remaining Leviathans with surgical precision. Each shot from the Vanguard hit with deadly accuracy, tearing through the weakened sections of the Tazkri warships. The Tazkri returned fire, their energy beams striking the Vanguard's hull, but the human ship weaved and dodged as best it could, using every ounce of its remaining speed to stay ahead of the assault. "Captain, we're running out of time," Ensign Greer warned. "They're going to fire again. This time, it'll be a direct hit." Soulless eyes never left the screen. The human ship was surrounded by enemy fire, and the countdown to destruction had already begun. But even with their backs against the wall, she couldn't bring herself to back down. They had come this far. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not be subjugated, no matter the odds. "We're not done yet," she muttered under her breath. The Vanguard's weapon systems began to overload, the strain of so many attacks pushing the ship's systems past their limits. But it didn't matter. Solus gave the final command, the one that would either destroy them or give them one last chance to strike a fatal blow. "Target the core of their flagship. Fire everything we've got," she commanded. The Vanguard fired its last salvo, a concentrated burst of high-yield plasma, guided by years of tactical planning and sheer human ingenuity. The blast hit the Tazkri flagship Tyrannus square in its exposed core, cracking the massive vessel wide open. The energy from the explosion tore through the flagship's main systems, sending shockwaves through the Tazkri fleet. The Tyrannus began to break apart, flames and debris swirling in every direction. The Tazkri fleet, momentarily stunned by the destruction of their flagship, faltered, their coordination slipping. The Vanguard, battered and scarred, used the brief window of opportunity to break free of the deadly blockade and maneuver out of the fray. But Solus knew this would not be a victory they could hold forever. The Vanguard had no more tricks, no more surprises to spring. They had given the Tazkri a taste of what they could do, but they would not survive much longer unless reinforcements arrived. "Reed, can you signal for backup?" Solus asked. Reed's face was grim as he shook his head. "We're too far out, Captain. The signal won't reach. We're on our own." Solus let out a long, steady breath. "Then we'll fight as long as we can. Humanity doesn't surrender." As the Vanguard limped away from the wreckage of the Tazkri flagship, the crew of the Vanguard knew they had made their mark. They had shown the Tazkri that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the mightiest of empires. And though their chances of survival were slim, they had ignited something in the galaxy, a spark of resistance.